As members of Yemen's top military brass quit or defect, scores of diplomats and senior officials resign. The president warns of a civil war. Is there an armed confrontation looming in the country? And is the president on his way out? This is Inside Story. Hello, a warm welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. Mixed messages from President Ali Abdullah Saleh. On the one hand, he's offering to step down by the start of next year. On the other, he's warning of grave repercussions over any dissent. He's dispatched his foreign minister to Saudi Arabia to seek mediation, but the demonstrators still out in the capital Sanaa and across the country remain defiant and galvanised. Key military officials offering them their protection. But the defence minister has declared the army is sticking by the president and tanks have manoeuvred to guard the presidential palace. Mohamed Shakir has the story.
He appeared on national television warning of a looming civil war. President Ali Abdullah Saleh was defiant, placing his destiny in the hands of his defence council, reminding them of their duty towards the nation.
Military is known for obedience, loyalty and faithfulness. You are receiving instructions from the central command, and your main duty is to maintain security, stability and the unity of the nation.
This situation is a direct result of Friday's killing of more than 50 protesters by sniper bullets after noon prayers. It was a turning point in the demonstrations against President Saleh's regime. It prompted dozens of former regime officials, senior military officers and diplomats to announce their defections or resignations. The president has attempted to distance himself from the killings, but the regrets and his sacking of his entire cabinet on Sunday was another move that was too little, too late. The defection of 3 military's top brass, at least one of whom is from President Saleh's Hashid tribe, has galvanized the protesters and made the president's departure feel all the more imminent. The announcement by General Ali Mohsen al-Ahmar, whose armored division is now protecting the protesters in Sanaa, was particularly welcomed.
I announce on their behalf our full backing and peaceful support to the peaceful youth revolution and their demands.
As the ring of domestic support around the president grows smaller, the government is looking elsewhere. The foreign minister on Tuesday visited Saudi Arabia to request mediation, and a presidential spokesman said Saleh is ready to step down by the end of this year. But for the demonstrators, the time for negotiations and concessions is past. Their sole demand is for Saleh's immediate removal from power.
Your own men in your party and in your government are quitting. Isn't this enough to put an end to this tragedy?
The momentum may now be with the demonstrators, but the military remains split. The defense minister says the army is still protecting the president and will block any attempted coup.
We will not allow any attempt to overthrow the legitimacy and the constitutional democracy or to shake the stability and security of the nation.
The military will soon have to make up their mind whether the regime and the nation are one thing or two different contradictory terms. Mohamed Shakir for Inside Story.
So a very precarious situation, and here to discuss what happens next are our guests. In London, Mohamed Qubaty, former advisor to the Yemeni Prime Minister, has since quit the government just 10 days ago to join the opposition. In Jeddah, Joseph Kechichian, columnist for Gulf News newspaper. And in New York, Bernard Haykel, Professor of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton University. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us. Well, certainly a lot has been happening just over the past few days. And we've heard from President Saleh speaking earlier on Tuesday, striking out against the army defections. Mohamed Qubaty, if I could start the discussion with you. At this point, can President Saleh say anything to save his position?
I don't think there's anything to save his position. He could just is now how to come out, with honor and to become a sort of an ex-president instead of the president who was just pushed out by force. I think the situation now is very grave, and we could be ending in a very worse scenario than we expected, because I thought the president today, he delivered a speech, and we're expecting from him an exit sort of policy or an exit plan. Unfortunately, that exit plan never materialized, and instead of that, he started speaking about the possibility of a civil war, which I don't believe that it is a real possibility unless he just wants to confront the protesters by force. Then I think the army, which has already split, would confront the units of the Republican Guards, which is still under his control.
Joseph Kechichian, what did you read into his speech? Did you feel that there were some very mixed messages? Just earlier, he was talking about stepping down by the beginning of next year, and then in the speech he was actually very defiant, warning of grave repercussions if the people who defected did not return to their positions.
Well, Ali Abdullah Saleh did not become what he is by being someone who is conciliatory. He has always had a very tough approach about himself. The defiant position that we saw today is very much in line with what he has historically projected. Unfortunately, it seems to me that if he loses the military, and he seems to be losing large chunks of it, there is no way in the world he can stay in power. I think that the Minister of Defense, Mohamed Nasser Ahmed, is still with him, technically because he wants to stay with the democratically elected president, as he says, a constitutional president, as he positions. But the majority of the senior officers in the military, led by Major General Ali Mohsen Ahmar, have in fact defected, and they no longer want to support him. The question right now is not whether there will be a civil war, because I agree with your previous guest, I don't think there will be one, but whether or not the ruling establishment itself will find the right solution to ease Ali Abdullah Saleh very gracefully out. It's his choice. He can either go gracefully or he can really fall out of power.
Bernard Haykel, how do you see it playing out for President Saleh?
Well, you see, unfortunately for Yemen, the President Saleh, unlike the situation in Egypt, getting him out of power is not just about him. It's also about some 25 members of his family who control different, the Republican Guard, internal security, many of the agencies, the key security agencies in the government, even the airlines, the oil company. A lot of these people, a lot of his family members, direct family members, either sons, nephews, or in-laws, control these institutions. And so, you need to find an exit strategy not just for him, but for his entire clan. And that's not an easy thing. And I think that Yemenis rightly did not, accept his offer to leave in 2012, a year from now, because they don't believe him. He has a record of always having lied. And he would use these different agencies of the government to clamp down on the opposition if they don't push hard right now for him to leave.
Mohamed Qubaty, you've just joined the opposition. Does it have an exit strategy to ease the president and his clan out?
Well, I think I agree with the comments given prior to me that we have got to have an exit plan which will include the complete entourage of the family and the president and his family. But I think there's no way that we can come out, he can come out gracefully without really moving or relinquishing his power to the second chain of command now. If he comes out, unfortunately, we have got a vice president who is not that capable of overlooking such a transit, phase. But if he comes out, say, for example, and appoints a new man or a council of people who would take over the transit period for the next 2-3 months, I think the dialogue, we can get back to the dialogue with the different opposition groups and with the opposition outside the country and even with the youths themselves. So an exit plan should be built on that him living and his nephews and sons and so on, so that we could get back into a state where we can build some confidence between both sides, so we can start a dialogue. But with him in his place, the man, I agree, he lacks complete now credibility. It's not a matter of deficit of credibility, but all credibility of him has been lost, If we go back to 1994, just prior to the civil war, President Ali Abdullah Saleh agreed, and he signed to the agreement at that time in Jordan, in Amman, the so-called agreement of accord and reconciliation. Then he came back to Yemen and he started the war, And in spite of that, people were looking forward, perhaps, that the agreement, which was sort of a program for political reform, they were willing to see that he can start that in implementing that agreement. But suddenly he said, no, this is an agreement of treason, So the question now that he wants to stay for another 6 months is out of rule completely, because people have no confidence in him, and they think that he's just waiting for the storm so that it passes and he will bend, and then he will start again to use his maneuvers and ploys and so on.
And indeed,
so
in
I
the
think
absence,
an exit plan.
if I can just jump in, because in the absence of any indication that he will hand over power to his vice president, how can you create the conditions that will allow him to leave?
That's what I've said. I mean, you see, the vice president has been appointed after the 1994 war. So till now, I mean, there's a lot of people who are asking about his legitimacy, the vice president. But if he appoints a new vice president, somebody who is credible, to the opposition, and we can start then a dialogue and with everybody, back in place, and then we have got a safe and sort peaceful transit of power, and then we can speak about elections, about a new constitution. His program of reform, which he has just produced some 10 days ago, is quite a very good program. But nobody believes that he is actually intending to implement those ideas. When he speaks about moving from a presidential system to a parliamentary system, when he speaks about devolution and total power local governance system, and then getting a new administrative division of the country into new provinces, bigger provinces, and having an electoral law which will take the proportional representation into it. All of these ideas are quite good, but everybody amongst them, his people inside the party, knew that these ideas, he was against them all the way for the past 2 or 3 years.
Okay, Bernard Haykel, if I could just jump in again. Bernard Haykel, you had something to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced that the solution is necessarily one that can be found in Yemen itself. I mean, I think that it's very important, in fact, to perhaps include Saudi and GCC country mediation, perhaps even the United States, because my feeling is that President Saleh will push this matter to the brink and beyond. He will get different units of the army to fight with the Republican Guard. I mean, he can really turn the country into a mess and practice a scorched earth policy with Yemen. And that's what worries me. I really think that Yemen is on the precipice here, and it's and there are many cleavages inside the country. I mean, you have a north-south divide, you have tribal divides, you have sectarian divide. He can play on a number of these divisions within Yemeni society. Even though the opposition and the young men who have been demonstrating, I must commend them. They've been incredibly disciplined and very peaceful, and Yemen has a lot of weapons, and no one has fired weapons at the government so far. So all of that is very good, but I think it's very important that in the package deal that has to be offered to him for him to leave and for his entire family to leave, you do need an outside group of people, of countries, to come and offer a solution. And for instance, a council that could rule Yemen in the interim while a new constitution is drafted and perhaps new parliamentary elections are held, a council could be formed to rule Yemen, where you would have representatives from the opposition, from the south. It would be very important, for instance, for the next leader of such a council to be from the south, so that the south doesn't secede. because that's a real possibility.
Indeed,
now.
And I would like to return to that point just in a few moments. First of all, I'd just like to stay on the issue of the international community. Joseph Kechichian, we've just seen on Tuesday the foreign minister be sent to Saudi Arabia. What do you expect Saudi to do about this?
Well, I mean, obviously the Saudis want to make sure that there is some kind of stability on their border. Yemen has always been the country that worried most Saudi leaders. But I agree with Bernard Haykel that, in fact, there's got to be some kind of a way out. Although Ali Abdullah Saleh, for the past 35 years, prevented the rise of alternatives to his rule. Therefore, even an interim solution, even if it's internationally sanctioned, whether led by Saudi Arabia or the GCC countries, will not have necessarily the people inside Yemen who will be able to have this interim government running. The only institution that is really standing on its own two legs right now are the parts of the military that are with the opposition. And it seems to me that there's got to be some kind of a solution rising between, on the one hand, the military officers who are loyal and some of the opposition leaders like Yassin Na'man and others who are willing to have a conciliation going. But the Saudis, the GCC countries, of course, they have their plates full with what's going on in Yemen, in Oman, and elsewhere. The last thing that they want is to have a full-fledged conflict on their border with the South. An interim solution sounds wonderful, and I think we will all support that kind of an interim solution. Realistically, however, the only group of people that actually can come to power are the military, or what's left of the military at this point.
Bernard Haykel, have you been surprised by a rather muted international reaction? We've only really seen France speaking out against President Saleh. Would you be expecting the US, for example, to be saying anything more?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that both the US and also Saudi Arabia have had no policy vis-a-vis Yemen, or at least their policy has been so far to stick with President Saleh because of fear that without him there would be chaos. And he has always used that threat very effectively with the Saudis and with the Americans. And in fact, this is the way in which he gets money from both regimes to threaten them with chaos in Yemen if he doesn't remain in power. And I don't think there's been creative or imaginative thinking on Yemen at all in either Washington, D.C. or Riyadh. And that's a problem, because they can't think of an alternative without the country breaking apart and turning into something like Somalia, which is what no one really wants, because that would be a catastrophe not only for Yemen but for the entire region. And I think that new solutions have to be thought of, that without President Saleh in power.
I was just going to add very briefly that, in fact, this is a conversation that is going on right now in Saudi Arabia. The greatest fear is not really to have Ali Abdullah Saleh turn over power, but actually to have a split of Yemen into three different countries, not just the two that everybody was familiar with when the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen and the Republic of Yemen existed, or the previous North Yemen, if you would like, but to also have a third section of Yemen split as well, with the Houthis in the north having their own country. So therefore, Riyadh, Bernard Haykel is correct. Riyadh is very much in a confused situation right now, doesn't know exactly how this is going to turn out, and it seems to me that there is a preponderance to assume that the situation will be handled by people who can keep the unity of the country together, presumably the military.
Now, Mohamed Qubaty, you have, as we've said, just joined the opposition. This is a scenario you could soon be facing. I also know that you come from the south and you've been involved in events down in Aden. Do you see the South secession movement gaining pace if Saleh should leave?
The question is, the question of unification and union is actually an idea which came from the South. If I just show you a book here, in 1924, Abdulaziz al-Tha'alibi came to Yemen, and the Southerners did put the idea of unification with Imam Yahya. But on which basis? You see, unification on the basis of partnership in power, partnership, in wealth, and equal sort of nativehood and equality of opportunity. So the question of unification has not been, the people in the South has not been against it as an idea. It's just against the way it has been, especially after the 1994 war, how things went out, you know. As I said, Ali Abdullah Saleh in 1994 agreed to the agreement of accord and reconciliation, but he stayed for 13 years and without moving anything forward. So the Southerners, I think, if we move to a sort of a federal system, you know, where instead of having, I do agree that some of the ideas now people are thinking of to divide Yemen into 3 or even 4 different parts. But if you have a real federal system built on, you know, a system of parliamentary system, then I think still the question of union is still viable. But by the way, the Saudis and the Americans, Ali Abdullah Saleh is a master of ploys, you know. He has been threatening them, and he has blown to out of all proportion the question that Al-Qaeda might take over in case of chaos, and the question that there might be secessionist movement and Al-Houthi could move and so on. This is what he has portrayed today in his speech. But I don't believe at all now, if you follow the events in Aden, I've just been in Aden 2 weeks ago, people are speaking about the viability of a new state of Yemen and to really sort of implement or materialize the question of having a new nation built democratically, and even to achieve the so-called historical compromise all over Yemen, to build a new federal state. But the Saudis, I agree with Haykel that we have got to have a package deal which is sanctioned both regionally and internationally and globally, both regionally and globally. And these people have been asking, and they've been playing within the so-called group of Friends of Yemen. They have been helping towards create and getting a viable and meaningful dialogue. But the dialogue won't be meaningful with the man being there, Ali Abdullah Saleh playing.
Okay, so President Saleh may not be the only one who can unite the country, but you can't deny the fact that the opposition is made up of a very many number of different groups, all with different agendas, and there is a void, a political void into which they're going to have to step.
Yes, I agree, but you see, if we start a dialogue, you know, I could speak of some of the leaders in the South, like Ali Nasser Muhammad or even Haidar Abu Bakr al-Attas. They said, "نحن مع التغيير لا التشطير." We are for change, not for real separation. You see, if we have a change and we go back to a real democratically built institutions and so on, then the question of union, it's the way unification has gone on. We have created a sort of a country which was built on non-federal basis, and that was a mistake. But here, if you go back in 1924, the Southerners and Adenese put to Imam Yahya a country which had been built on a union, a federal union, whereby Imam Yahya at that time would be a ruler in a parliamentary system where he reigns, he rules, but he doesn't reign.
I'm just going to jump in there because we have almost run out of time. I just want to pose one last question to Joseph Kechichian. How much time do you give President Saleh?
Well, obviously no one really knows, but I think that it all depends whether or not the remaining officers, senior officers in the military, stick it out with him. It seems for the time being they're gonna wait for a little longer to see how it's gonna work out in the streets. But it is a temporary situation. I think that Ali Abdullah Saleh really has lost his legitimacy to rule over Yemen at this point. It's up to him to really figure out how he's going to leave the scene, whether he's going to be remembered as the president of Yemen who has ruled over a unified country, or whether or not he's going to leave the country totally divided.
Okay, volatile times indeed. And it certainly won't be the last time we'll be discussing the events in Yemen here. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us in London. Mohamed Qubaty, in Jeddah, Joseph Kechichian, and in New York, Bernard Haykel. And thank you too for watching. If you want to get involved, we do welcome your comments and suggestions to us at InsideStory@AlJazeera.net. Bye for now.